Welcome to Elevate, a Women's Leadership Institute podcast where we showcase stories, celebrate successes, and shift culture. Hello and welcome to another episode of Elevate, a Women's Leadership podcast. We are here with our power couple, Dr. Kyle Jones and his partner, Becky. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having us.
We appreciate you coming today. I'd like to turn it over to you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit more about you, what you do, and maybe your connection with the Women's Leadership Institute.
Sure. So I am a family physician at the University of Utah. So I spend part of my time practicing medicine, but then part of it teaching medical students and doing a little research and whatnot. Our personal bios, of course, overlap quite a bit, but we have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls from 9 to 19, which is great. They're awesome kids. We love them.
In case they're listening.
That's right. But also, I have done a lot of work and with presenting and writing about mental health issues and trying to decrease the stigma and support people to be able to take advantage and take over their own wellness. Now, I have written some books about it and whatnot, but that's kind of what led me to the Women's Leadership Institute. Is I'm on the board and present as well to the career advancement students. So, so it's been a wonderful experience for me and very rewarding.
Very good. Thank you. We love having you on our board.
Thanks.
Yeah. And Becky.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Well, my connection with the Women's Leadership Institute has mostly been peripheral. I've come with him a few times as he's presented and gotten to meet a lot of the women there. But being a woman who is very interested in empowering women and in just creating, more spaces where women can be really themselves and we can say true things and hard things is really important to me. As a speech pathologist, that's actually a career that was traditionally and still really is kind of more of a pink collar job where it's predominantly women in the profession. And so I think over the years I've been able to see up close a lot of the struggles that women have when they're trying to balance life with work and also their own interests and hobbies and everything else. And right now I actually working at the University of Utah, he mentioned we work together, but I do a lot of supervision at the grad student level. So they come to me, and so a lot of those women that I'm able to mentor, I see a lot of the questions and the struggles that they have too.
Yeah, when I think of mental health, I don't necessarily think of medicine.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So I think that's a fascinating angle where you both are working with students who are coming up in medicine and, like you said, pink collar. I didn't know it was called that. That's great. Women in the profession. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about the overlap of that, what you've learned in that.
Well, one big thing is that amongst physicians in particular and med students and residents have higher rates of mental illness and suicide than the general public. And so that's partially what got me started talking a lot about it, but also my experiences with anxiety and depression and dealing with that. My first book is about that, kind of my experience as a physician dealing with those things. And it's kind of naturally progressed because of Becky's influence and WLI and whatnot, that more into women and their struggles because women physicians and students struggle with it even more than male physicians do. And for obvious reasons that we've touched on, that there's a lot of extra pressures that exist. And so keeping that in mind, I think is really big for everybody to know what we're dealing with and how best to tackle it.
Yeah. Because in medical school, I mean, we have a family of physicians, different kinds of physicians, and it is stressful. It is long hours. It is, you have to know all the answers. It's, sleeping in between shifts. Sometimes it seems a bit immoral what we ask our medical students and doctors to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then add all the unseen things of women, right? All that invisible labor.
Don't forget their support crew and their partners or their
absolutely
their family, because I do think it puts, the pressure of every other aspect of life onto the partner while they're
Yeah, to
focusing
manage while
on
they're
medical
managing
school.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes there needs to be support groups for partners, right?
I
Right.
think so. It was kind of tricky. They do exist, but I
Mhm.
think, at least in our experience, the groups we were with, there were very few students going in who already had children starting out. We had
Mm.
one child starting med school, and then we had a second one while he was in med school, and kind of on from there. And it was very isolating, I think.
Yeah.
It was difficult, and just transitioning from being a professional woman to mostly dealing with things at the home
Mm.
level. It was really a hard transition for me, for
Yeah.
sure.
Did you know that going in? Like you're like, yeah, medical school, let's do it. And then you're
Well-
like, wait, what? Well, wait a minute.
Yeah, well, I had a fellowship to complete. So when we moved to Wisconsin, where he went to
Okay.
medical school at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and so I did my residency there. I was in a Jewish care center, so it was a very interesting place to be
Mhm.
doing speech therapy. But when I finished that residency or fellowship, it was tricky because at the point we were at, he was gone so many hours in the day that it just made more sense for me to stay home for a little while. So that's the choice I made.
Sure.
But it was really tough on my mental health to really
Mm.
take on the full burden of taking care of the home and the family, and kind of setting my professional pursuits aside for a little while. I think that's something that a lot of women end up having to make that choice at some point,
Yep.
or trying to juggle the two. And there's just not a lot of support in our community, or sometimes in our families. There's not a lot of support for making those kinds of decisions and recognizing what a challenge that is to try to decide what the best balance is.
Yeah, I love that we've hit on it both from you and practicing your desired career and you in choosing to take a moment off from your career. Both need resources, right?
Yeah.
Often especially in the past, companies or organizations weren't willing to give or didn't even know they should or could give.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think overall it's really an important discussion. You touched on your book. Let's tell them the title of it if they want to. I'll put
Yeah.
it in the show notes. Tell them the title, and
So I've written 3 books. My first one that I mentioned is
because you
called-
weren't busy enough.
Exactly. I know. She rolls her eyes as I say that. The first one's called Fallible, a memoir of a young physician's struggle with mental illness. So it's available on Amazon or
Okay.
anywhere. But and I started talking about my experiences about 10 years ago, roughly 2014.
Okay.
I was writing regular articles for the American Academy of Family Physicians and thought, this is something I've struggled with. I bet there are others out there.
Yeah.
There's got to be. And so started writing about it. And all of a sudden, all of these physicians are like, yeah, I've experienced that too. I've had the same problem or whatnot. It was like they would just come out of a little woodwork. And so I thought, boy, we need to explore this a little bit more and be more open about it and the struggles it creates for all of us.
Were they open, or were they like, don't tell anyone, but I also struggle? Like, what was that?
They weren't necessarily, they weren't not open. They didn't say, don't tell anyone.
Okay.
But it was like, oh, finally someone who gets it. Finally
sure.
I can talk about
Who
it
has
with
experience and is talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so second and third book.
Yeah, so my second one is a satire. So it's called Hospital, a medical satire of unhealthy
no.
proportions. So that one was just for fun.
Sure.
And then
I bet you had plenty of material, right?
Yes, that's right. And then my third one came out in April. It's aimed at teenagers who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who
Okay.
struggle with mental health issues. And it's called When All Hope Seems Lost, a gospel perspective on mental illness in youth.
Interesting. I love that you shared a personal story and then kind of the satire of, and then right with your kids, the focus on how to help kids in general, right? I think
Yeah.
everybody needs all the help we can get, for
Yes.
sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing those.
Mhm.
Let's see. So let's talk about when you come and present. And I knew I wanted you both together because I know that you're a strong woman with strong opinions, because we just touched base a couple times after the presentations. And I thought, what a great pairing, right? To show both sides of this. But a few of the concepts you talk about when you come include burnout
Hmm.
in this mental health space, how to talk about it, what that looks like in professions. Do you want to share some of those points, and then we'll get into the experiment
Yeah.
in a little bit.
Yeah. There's been a lot of research in recent years about the burnout that we all feel.
Yeah.
And it's basically we're kind of alienating each other, so to speak, or ourselves sometimes from our work or from family or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. And a lot of the research has pointed to, like, it all comes down to leadership, that how the leader of a company or supervisor, middle management, whatever, how they address and approach their coworkers is what really makes the difference.
Wow.
And
It's big.
it is big. And I think it all kind of boils down to control, communication, and community.
Okay.
Those are the three main things where all the research that says, hey, this is a problem, they kind of all boil down to that.
Okay.
So control, being able to have as much control as possible over your job, which obviously there are limitations, but every little bit you can have really makes a big difference to.
So the autonomy of it. Huh?
Yes, exactly. And then communication, I imagine that we've all had experience where working with someone where they're just not communicating things very well, or they're doing things without our knowledge or without our input, and how important that is. But then also community, being able to feel like you're a team, and that you're in it together. Those three things really kind of, I think, summarize all of what the issue with burnout is and how we can help that.
Interesting. So the 3 C's, right? Let's restate them. They are control.
Uh-huh.
Do you have control at your job or home or wherever you are?
Mm-hmm.
Communication. Do you feel like you're being communicated with enough or with the right information?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then community. Do you have a sense of belonging?
Yeah.
That'd be fair to say?
Absolutely.
In the situation? It's really interesting because they seem like 3 pretty yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But how nuanced and how complicated they can be.
Yes. No kidding.
Which could be a very trifecta of toxicity.
Yes.
And thanks to the pandemic, right? Maybe this all came to a head so people talk about it more because so many of us experienced a disruption in maybe one or all 3 of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I remember going to the park and there was caution tape around the park with my kids, and I felt a loss of control because I was like, what does that mean if we can't even get on the slide while we're all home?
Yeah.
So interesting. Yes.
I'm trying
Becky.
to find that job that has all of those pieces.
Yeah.
Can be like finding the holy grail of jobs.
Right.
Right.
I really am very happy with my job now, but I'm somewhat new to the clinic. I worked in a care center in Holiday, and it was through the pandemic, the first year or two. And, talking about burnout, that's exactly where I was. I had taken that job mostly because it was within walking distance of our home, so I could run home and feed babies if I needed to and go back. So it wasn't necessarily professionally fulfilling for me in the way I wanted, but I had been there, 12 years because of the convenience of it. But the pandemic just took it to a whole different level. In those care centers, you probably remember they were so worried about the elderly population. And so we were in full, at the end of the movie E.T. when there's plastic hallways and everyone looks like space characters.
Yes.
That is what we looked like. And, we lost some lovely people and it was traumatic and it definitely pushed me into that burnout place. And so when I went looking for my next job, I wanted something that would be flexible, that would give me a lot of autonomy to, do the therapy that I feel like needs to be done in the way I feel like it needs to be done. And, we really have that at our clinic because we work with special needs individuals. We have to be very creative. And I really missed that piece of my work of just having to think outside the box and find different and, fun and exciting ways of doing things. And so, I think a lot of times women feel nervous and anxious to reinvent themselves later in life.
Absolutely.
I was very set in that job after 12 years and I thought,
scary.
I know how to do all of this kind of therapy. And so, January of 2022 is when I took this new job, and the first few months I thought, what have I done? Because I'm going back trying to remember. I mean, the scope of practice of a speech pathologist is rather large. There are all kinds of different
Sure.
therapies we can do. And so there were some I hadn't
Done for a while.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was new. But I think, that's really one of the best ways to address burnout, I think, is to really step back away from where you are and see if there's a different way you can reinvent yourself and maybe, grow an aspect of your creativity or something about yourself that you have maybe shelved for a while. And I think that
Yeah.
can really invigorate, and then find a job that will allow you, your priorities to be met.
Yeah. I love that you knew that about yourself and then were able to lean into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go over for those listening, because I'm always like, am I in burnout? Is this what burnout feels like, right? So it's like a loss of interest, it's a loss of productivity, you care, but somehow there's a disconnection with that care and the
Yeah.
results. What other couple characteristics come to mind when you think of burnout?
A big one is like depersonalization.
Okay.
And you kind of touched on that a little bit, but you are kind of separating yourself, sometimes physically, but emotionally or mentally from your work, or colleagues. It's a lot of, I like to refer to it as like emotional inflammation in your job.
Yeah, I love that.
Because we all know what inflammation is in our body and how it can negatively impact us, and so that's what it feels like. Oftentimes, sometimes people are thinking like, well, am I burned out, or do I have depression, or
Yeah, they all kind of seem very similar.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And with burnout, it's something that you experience while you're at work, and
Mhm.
then you kind of, the idea is, okay, you go on vacation, you're doing great,
And you feel
then
better.
and then as soon as you come back to work, it kind of all comes back to you.
That's a great way to say it.
Whereas depression doesn't really leave,
Okay.
when you leave work.
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes that can be tough, and sometimes they're both there, or both interplaying on each other.
Maybe you have a little of both.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, so it can be really tough.
Well, and I was thinking about your comment. I've had times where I've been able to recognize like the depersonalization specifically, something that I was super passionate about. And then I'm like, meh.
Yeah.
Meh.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to change course before I get knee deep in burnout, because once you're in burnout, it's kind of hard to like kickstart that creativity and those kind of things that could
challenging.
really help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to
Absolutely.
notice those characteristics early. Okay. One thing that you talked about emotional inflammation, and sociology is part of what I love. And so when you brought up the Stanford experiment, I admit I totally geeked out about it. So let's share that with our audience who hasn't heard about it, and then let's tie it back into mental health.
Yeah. So the Stanford prison experiment, I'm with you. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So
And we can't do these anymore. Like,
right,
yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
thank goodness.
Right. But how much we've learned.
So 1971 at Stanford, there's a sociologist named Philip Zimbardo, and he wants to do an experiment where he puts people in a new role of authority and see how they handle that. So he gets a bunch of student volunteers, and the idea is for 2 weeks, he randomly splits them up where half of them are going to be prisoners, the other half are going to be prison guards, and then we just see what happens, kind of a thing.
It's like Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, exactly. What could go wrong? So what ends up happening is the guards end up literally torturing those who are the prisoners. They wake them up multiple times in the night. They spray them with fire extinguishers. They withhold food. They take their clothes and their mattresses out of the
And they
their
do
rooms.
this just of their own accord, right? No one's
Exactly.
telling them to do this.
Exactly. It's fascinating, kind of the sociology and the psychology of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so at the end of day 4, remember this is supposed to be 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
there is a psychology postdoc who is supposed to come in and do some interviews as part of the study. And she comes in and sees this and is mortified of all these things going on. And she immediately goes to Dr. Zimbardo and says, hey, you got to stop this. Like, we can't go for 2 weeks. And he's like, well, it's fine. We'll just see how it plays out.
Right. No one's
And then-
getting hurt.
Exactly. They'll be okay. And when she finally the next day is able to pull him in and he sees what's going on, they immediately end the experiment. And I think what's most fascinating to me is that what happened with this psychology postdoc, she saw this torture, this literal torture, and her mind immediately went to wanting to study burnout in people at work.
Yeah.
And I think, wait a minute, torture to
Yeah.
burnout at work.
That's a whole different messaging, isn't it?
It is. And her name is Christina Maslach. She is the foremost researcher on burnout and basically kind of started the field and has brought so much of what we know about it, all because she saw these college student volunteers being tortured.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Because she
I
felt
don't
like
know.
they were emotionally inflamed and that's why they acted in these different ways. Like what was the bridge there for her?
I'm not entirely sure. I think a lot of it was she saw, hey, when you're put in a difficult and negative environment, then you respond very poorly. So what's going on? How is that environment impacting you and your response?
Yeah.
But my goodness.
Yeah. Talk about community, control, communication.
Yes.
But having worked in some really toxic environments, I guess it could be like torture, right?
Yeah.
It could feel like that.
It really could.
A really interesting perspective. Becky, I know that you've heard that experiment a couple times. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on it?
I just am shocked that was allowed to happen, for one thing.
Yes.
Oh, that's just a hard thing for me to even think about. But I mean, just kind of thinking about burnout more, kind of shifting just a little bit. A lot of my students from the University of Utah that go to the speech therapy program there, they come and they're in my clinic with me and they get to ask me questions and whatever they want. And I always give them a day and I say, you can ask me anything you want. It can be professional, it can be personal. And they always say, how do I balance my life? How do I prevent burnout? How do I keep my excitement and interest in this field and not, let it get to the point where I'm hating life and wishing I chose something else.
Right.
And I think part of it is that so many of my students, well, all of them have been women so far in the 2 years I've been there. And I have, quite a few coming through. I haven't had a male student yet. Hopefully I will. So at some point we need some males in the profession, but
Yeah.
a lot of them just say, if I choose to have a family and children, how do I do all of this and how do I make it all happen? And I think sometimes that work-life balance question almost stresses women out more because they feel like there's this perfect balance that they need to strike and that it's out there if they can just figure out what it is, if they can
Right.
make the right plans and, do all the things. And I think
Yeah.
that is an unrealistic expectation that just sets us up to be disappointed and to feel like we're failing.
Yeah.
And burnout is sure to follow when
Yeah.
that happens. So I talk with them a lot more about trying to integrate their life with their work, find that, good combination of characteristics in their job that
Yeah.
works for them personally, for their personality and their life circumstances. And then also to, work with their partner on how to balance their home life.
Yeah.
So that
together.
everyone's in that together and equally invested
Yeah.
in the life they're building.
That's a really interesting point because burnout could happen at work, but burnout could happen at home or it could happen in your community. So there's really multiple layers that you could be burnout on. And if you're acting on 3 layers and they're all burnout, you got to plug yourself back in a socket somewhere. And
Yeah.
many people don't know what rejuvenates them, right? They haven't
Right.
always they're like, well, when I was young, I liked.
Mhm.
But I'm like, what did you do this week that
Yeah,
rejuvenates you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hobbies are important, even if they're, things they don't necessarily have to take a lot of time or money, but I think finding something that is very separate from your other roles in life can be very rejuvenating.
Yeah. I think this is a great time to talk about both of your hobbies. What do
All
you
right.
guys do to to rejuvenate?
Go ahead. Because yours is a lot cooler than mine.
Well, I started out in college studying vocal performance. I was planning to be a professional singer,
Okay.
and I kind of set that aside and chose what I thought at the time was a more practical career, which I've loved too.
Sure.
But I really missed that performing angle. So a couple of years ago, I was approached by a local musician that was putting together an ABBA tribute band. And so I went and auditioned. And so I've been doing that. It's been really fun. Lots of sequin costumes and 1970s psychedelic crazy colors.
I love it. Yes.
It's been really fun. So we do some local gigs, and it's nice to go and just get in touch with that part of myself that
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of forgot about for a while. So I
Sure.
think that really helps with burnout in all areas of my life. Having that hobby can help me just find a little more energy for everything else.
And
Yeah.
it really has. I've definitely noticed that in
Yeah?
her. It really has been a wonderful thing, and it was kind of, it wasn't really an opportunity you were looking for
No,
necessarily,
it just
but
kind of dropped in my lap one day.
yeah, but
You
it was
never
like
know.
you came back to yourself
Yeah.
in some ways.
And now I wear bell bottoms in my everyday life.
That's awesome. Eva's wearing off on you. It's kind of like sometimes when I go out, I have a book club, neighborhood ladies that I love. And even if it's super stressful getting there, my partner's always like, please go because you are so much happier in yourself when you come home.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then trying as much as we can to just leave that guilt at the door, you know?
I've named mine, right? When
Yeah.
I'm just stay at the door. Front
Stay at the door. I think all women in feel that to a certain degree. I think it's a cultural expectation that women are supposed to be all things to all
It's
people.
tricky for sure.
And you know, we can't. We're just one person.
Yeah.
But I do that, you know, in my job, I have caregivers, and a lot of them are women who come in with their, you know, their child or their adult child. And I can just tell that they need reassurance that they're doing a good job,
Mhm.
reassurance that, you know, the decisions they're making they're doing the very best that they can. And they don't
Because
need
your
to feel
kids
bad
don't
about
usually
it.
tell you that, right?
Yes, they do not. They do not. And so I would say that's a big part of my job, is just trying to empower women to recognize, you know, that they're doing their best
Mhm.
and that they
To
can
claim that.
let go of some of those feelings as much as they can, because
Yeah.
women are amazing. They're doing amazing things, especially with all of the expectations that are put on our shoulders. I'm always amazed at what we can do.
We can handle.
Sorry,
Mhm.
you're good too.
Oh, that's all right.
Well,
I don't disagree with anything.
I
You're doing
think there
awesome.
is like, right, like if you are in a career trajectory, typically, you know, that has been a man's place to be, and he gets recognition.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But like at home, those babies are not like, thanks for, you know, coming to get me. So
Yeah.
that recognition part, and not saying that that's always how it's been or that's how it should be, but typically that has happened. And one thing when I was reading up on burnout is that one way a company and others can help is through recognition.
Yeah.
So I love that you're just giving the recognition. You're doing a great job. You know, here's how you are doing great things, and be specific in that.
Yeah.
So I think that matters.
Absolutely.
So tell us about, how do you rejuvenate, Kyle?
So I have a lot of different ways I do it, but over the last year, I've been trying out stand-up comedy, which, first of all, is terrifying.
I bet. I'm terrified.
but it's really fun.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, all I do is just open mic nights, and
Okay.
you know, it's nothing fancy, and I haven't done it a ton, but but you know, like I mentioned, writing the satire, like
Yeah.
I love just coming up with funny things, and you know, she doesn't find most of it that funny because we have
Oh,
slightly
no.
different senses of
Senses
humor.
of humor.
but it's a lot of fun, you know, and so to get up, and it's funny too with open mic nights.
Yeah.
It's mostly just other people trying it out, and so
Mm.
you're basically trying to make
It's a
each
good
other
test
laugh.
audience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's that much more challenging and whatnot. But even just learning how to structure a joke, or
There's a real
know,
science to it.
there
Yeah.
is.
There's an art to it.
yeah. And so, you know, you can easily come up with a funny topic, but to actually make a joke or a series of jokes that work is really hard. But I like the mental exercise of it.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah. It makes
Yeah.
your brain work maybe in a different way.
Yeah, it does. And so I like things such as that, where I do have to approach not necessarily a problem, but approach something from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always gotten that from writing too, but this is kind of a new way that I've been doing my brain gymnastics, I guess.
So, well, first of all, I think that is so brave, right? And would you walk me through the process of like deciding, okay, so I'm going to go into open mic night to getting up there? Like, did you write it down? Do you kind of like have a gist and then you riff off that? Like, what's the process there for you?
For me, obviously, it would be different for everybody.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, you usually get like 3 minutes. And
Okay.
so it's very
Pretty short.
quick. Yeah, you have to kind of get right into it. So I will write it all down beforehand and practice it a lot. And I may not get it exactly word for
Yeah.
word, but that's okay. I'm not good at like improv or coming
Okay.
up with things right on the spot. So I do have to be prepared. But, a lot of the stuff actually comes from our kids because our kids are hilarious.
I bet.
and so especially like writing the satire and like just sitting around the dinner table making each other laugh.
Hmm.
And I think first of all, I think that's something we're both very proud of is laughter's a big deal in our house.
Yeah.
And so it's also kind of been that element of almost a group dynamic, so to speak, of coming up with some of the jokes. And sometimes I will say, "Hey, I thought of this. ASMR is funny. How do you make a joke out of that? Like what how should we approach this? And just kind of let them go. And it's awesome.
That's
It's a lot
cool.
of fun.
Yeah, and it's hitting on multiple levels, right? Your relationship with your kids,
Mhm.
the laughter is so healing, right? And it's also back to the work-life harmony
Mhm.
tied into that as well, right? Like your
Yeah.
satire with your work, and
Yeah.
it's really smart.
And all those
Smart choice.
pieces of your family culture, I think. I mean, part of our family culture, I feel, is that, it's important for us to do things that we find fulfilling. And we encourage our
Mm.
kids to do that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the humor is a big part of our family culture. Music is a big part of our family culture. I think those kinds of things growing up, and especially my daughters, I really want them to see me going after things I want in life
Mhm.
and just, having a lot of joy in things that really fill my soul, that I just, I want to get out of bed to do those things.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for them to see because I think in some ways it gives them permission when they are in my situation that they can do the same.
Mhm. Yeah, it shows them how, right?
Mhm.
Definitely leading by example. So let's marry that back into the topic of burnout, because sometimes burnout is legit, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't quit the job you're at. Sometimes you're not going to escape the boss you have.
Yeah.
How have you found, or what is the research on, like, how do you continue to be creative, balanced while managing that piece that might seem so heavy?
I wish I had an easy answer for that.
Yeah, me too. Push the
That is
easy
tough.
button, right?
Right. Because it is tough. And part of it too is one thing I have learned, there are certainly times where I feel like I'm drifting more towards feeling burned out.
Sure.
But I try to find those relatively little things in my job that are meaningful or that are important or that I do enjoy. And then inside myself, I'm amplifying those. And so, yeah, maybe I'm not getting along well with my boss or whatnot, but if I focus on this project that I think is really cool, it's obviously the difficult things don't go away, but it can at least kind of push you through and help you motivate and have some creativity and whatnot to keep going.
Yeah, that idea of what you resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
So leaning into the things you love, right? Helping amplify those. I think that's really, I can see that. I can see how people have done that. How
Yeah.
about you?
Well, I think for burnout for women, a lot of it is just simply that we have too much on our plate.
A no is a complete
Right.
sentence.
Yes. But I also think that I feel like, and I hope that as we move further away from what used to be your typical division of roles between men and women,
Yeah.
I feel like there's still a lot of room to improve there. I mean, you look at a lot of the statistics, even when if you have a heterosexual couple, even if both the man and the woman are working full time, the woman is still doing a bigger majority of the family tasks.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with lots of conversations. I mean, we've been married 22 years.
21.
Congratulations.
Good job, us. Yeah. And we've had, I mean, hundreds of conversations
Of
over those
course.
years
Yeah.
about, invisible labor and what that looks like. And, learning to not walk past baskets of clean laundry, but to pick them up and put them away, And these are hard conversations to have. And I think a lot of women feel like they need to be superwoman. They need to work and they need to do all the family things too. And it just isn't possible. You're only one person.
Well, and you're not sure what to let go of.
Right.
Because it all feels important.
It does. It all feels important. And some of those tasks, if you don't get to them regularly, kind of, they exponentially grow. So I think really finding a partner for people who are not partnered, but also if you have a partner, to really work on how to just really work through all of the responsibilities that you have so that both of you have space for your creative pursuits. You both have space to have some rejuvenation time, and that everyone wins in that scenario. If you have one burned out partner and the other one's doing all the things they want to do, that doesn't really work. That's not going to make for a happy relationship that lasts,
Right. Well, and probably the other partner will get burnout too, right? It affects everybody's dynamic. One thing that my partner and I have done is just write all the tasks down, because I feel like some things are gendered tasks, and I had to realize my bias in that, right? Like, there's no reason I can't be out mowing the lawn. Why do I think that that's his job? So we just wrote them all down and then picked the tasks we want to do. You hate dishes, but I love them. I will do them. You do the laundry, That's one pretty easy way that we had that conversation, because they can get sticky. They can get sticky.
Sometimes there's competition about who's done more or who's doing what. And I don't really think everything needs to be perfectly even. I don't think that's realistic, and everyone has different aptitudes and different speeds. But I think if everyone feels comfortable with how things are divided, then you don't have the resentment building up in the relationship, and it just makes for a healthier family, a healthier relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I think those concepts of being valued, right, and being recognized, we've come full circle, because those are important at work too.
Yeah.
Because we know statistically women usually leave their jobs because they don't feel valued. Now, whether they spoke up and told someone or not is a whole nother story, but I think that's really important. So as we bring it back to the workplace, what are some tips because I remember in one of your presentations, you said you don't have to fix people. If you're a manager and someone comes to you and says, I have real anxiety around this project or whatever, what are some tips with that? Because I feel like especially women were like, oh, we got to take care of this. What do we do? What does this look like? Let's give our audience some ideas on how to manage that.
Kind of the biggest thing that I like is I came across the term learn or lead with curiosity, of where you are trying to make that connection with your colleagues or someone you supervise. You are trying to communicate with them, and it's okay to just let them talk, and
there doesn't have to be an objective or
exactly. And hopefully you have established a relationship where they feel safe that they can share that with you. But just that idea, lead with curiosity, I thought was great. Be curious about the person and how that leads to a greater relationship and greater trust with each other.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes people just need to talk it out, right? Because like you said, we're isolated more and more. Yeah. So being able to talk it out and have some community is helpful.
It is. It makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just let people talk it out. And at what point do you say you might need some help, or we have some help, or do you let the person decide that whenever they're ready for it?
It's tough because obviously the managers or the leaders aren't therapists, or they don't they can't act as that, and sometimes they don't know, like I don't know if you should be seeing someone else or
that's
not.
That's a great point.
And it might be simply bringing up the topic and saying, I'm really sorry you're struggling with all this. I can understand where it's coming from. Do you feel like it would be helpful to meet with someone and talk a little bit more about it, or
Great. Yeah.
and
It's
just
like curiosity again.
yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And so just kind of letting them know, hey, this is an option. It's okay.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you need it, let's do it, and I support you.
I love that. And I heard, maybe it was through your presentation or other things, of if leadership is taking care of themselves, is doing what they need to do, then those under them are more typically going to take that. Right.
Yeah.
But if they have the resources and everything and they don't take care of them, then their employees typically don't either. Right.
Yeah,
So
they
it
kind
has to be modeled.
exactly. They take their
Mhm.
direction from what they see from
Yes.
their leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I was just thinking from the perspective of someone who's a leader in their work environment. I think it's important to ask people what they need and really
Mhm.
give them space to be honest about it.
Yeah.
I think there's a long time been a culture in work, and especially for women, I think we've felt like we need to one up everyone else in the work
Mm.
environment a little bit to feel like we earn our place there. I hope that's becoming less so, but
Like a competition,
or
one-upping?
just kind of like you can't have any needs or any you can't have any
sure.
you can't have an opinion different of what your boss wants you to do. You
Yes,
need
you
to
gotta
be
go
on
along
board,
and yeah, okay.
and be run faster, go further. But I think if the leadership is asking what employees need to be successful at their job, and then if employees are willing to really speak up and say what they do need
Mm.
to be more successful at their job, to be more effective, as a mother who works, there's been times when I've had to bring a kid to work, and we just kind of put him in the office next door, and I check on him between patients, and some days are like that.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a sick child and you don't have another option, and I think that kind of support in our clinic, there is support for that. I think
Mhm.
our clinical management team recognizes that we have lives in addition to work, and sometimes they collide.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so I think being able to speak up and say what we really need, even when
Mm.
it seems scary,
Mhm.
I think more often than not, that's met with someone trying to meet you halfway and problem solve.
Yeah. One other thing when they were talking about recognition is also the ability to have some kind of survey or
Mhm.
feedback, right?
Yeah.
Maybe anonymous, so you can actually say what you need, um, or attaching it and then giving it to a manager and saying, hey, talk to the people on your team.
Mhm.
But that's nice because sometimes everybody expresses their communication differently, right? Verbal, written. So I think that kind of mechanism helps too.
And then it's on the leader too to take that seriously.
Mm.
Because
Yeah, what does that look like?
oftentimes it's like, oh, I know who put that. Like that's just him. Like I don't know.
Right.
But to recognize that, hey, even if I don't see that it's a problem, this other
Mhm.
person is seeing that it's a problem.
Yeah.
And so what can I do to help support them better?
Yeah, I love that. Valuing their experience, even though
Mhm.
it might be different than yours. You're like, well, I never had a problem with that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they actually don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Um, I love that we've talked about so many things, right? Both family perspectives, work perspectives, personal perspectives on burnout and how to rejuvenate ourselves. What are some thoughts that we haven't covered? Is there anything burning that you'd like to say on this topic or to our audience of both men who are working on like helping women lead
Mhm.
and men lead, right? Because um, when you help someone elevate themselves, it usually elevates the whole company, right? It
Mhm.
elevates the whole family, it elevates the whole community.
Mhm.
So, what are some last parting words that you would like to share with our audience?
I know you have a thought we'd been talking about a lot with childcare.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about our time in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So when he was in medical school and I was taking that break from
Yeah.
paid employment, I started actually teaching fitness classes at the YMCA there.
Okay.
They have a very big YMCA program. But the YMCA also provided all of these kind of experiences and activities for children. They had a really
Mhm.
robust daycare that had, all kinds of fun activities. So it's not like the daycare where you see all the children sadly sitting there waiting for them. Some gym daycares are a little
Their hand out the
sketchy.
door.
Yes. This one was wonderful. And our kids loved it. And
Mhm.
it kind of made me recognize at the time, because I had this really affordable and quality childcare, I was able to take classes to learn how to teach fitness. And so I taught Zumba and I taught
Mm.
weightlifting and all these things that I loved. But that was the piece that I needed to make that happen.
Right.
Because we were far away from people we knew. We didn't have
Right.
anyone we really felt comfortable with. And so, I really do hope as a community that we move more toward just having a few more childcare options, having a system available. And I know that's something that there are mixed opinions about, but
Right.
I really feel like that's the piece that is a make or break it for a lot of women, is having a place for their kids to go where they can be taken care of. And then it gives them so many other opportunities, because that's an important
Yes.
piece. We all want to know that our children are safe and taken care of
That's
and are
right.
having enriching experiences. And then we can go out into the world and give our best.
Yeah.
Too.
Because it creates a safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. I just read something about Sweden and their ability to give parental leave, and then also leave for grandparents if grandparents want to
Mm.
come in. And I just thought that's a really
Wow.
beautiful way to support families.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's really supporting families.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Kyle?
Just one thought that, since I'm obviously coming at it from the male perspective, is I know a lot of males just feel threatened by empowering women,
Mm.
but like empowering women to do what you do best or to do what you want to do doesn't diminish anybody else.
Mm.
Like you say, elevating one elevates all of us.
Mhm.
And that's a really important thing. And that's okay. We don't need to feel threatened. We don't need to say, well, it's not really a problem because I'm not experiencing that.
Right.
It's okay to listen and to help out and to support as best we can.
I love that you brought that up, because that can be a very sticky point, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that the Women's Leadership Institute really, it must be collaborative.
Yeah.
If we're to build systems that last and are sustainable, it's going to take all of us together. And I think the thing that I've seen, I love giving people opportunities to learn
Mm-hmm.
and lead, and then watch them do that and light up.
Yeah.
So if people are able to do their best, whatever that is, your best, my best, it just lights the rest of us up, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to diminish us because someone else is shining.
Yep.
So I love that thought to end on, let's create more of that, right?
Yeah.
And notice our burnout so we can help it in either ourselves or others.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of leading with curiosity, both internally, I'm a journaler, so I write, and that really helps with my burnout to notice it. And laughing with whoever you're around, right? Whether your family or coworkers, how important that is.
Yeah.
So, such a pleasure. It's been a delight. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and your humor. And I will never look at stand-up comedians again the same, or ABBA tribute band. But that's really fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you.
Patty.